Hello, everybody. Welcome to Disasters Happen. My name is Kevin Hansen. I'm this year's president of the Kirkland Chamber of Commerce, and this event is co-hosted by the Chamber of Commerce and the City of Kirkland Office of Emergency Management. And events like this don't pop up out of thin air. I have a few thank yous to make. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this evening, Jim Feek of Conover Feek Insurance. And thank you, Jim. And we'd also like to thank the people who planned this event, Heather Kelly and Carissa Smith from the city. Thank you, Heather. And there's a whole group of people, the Town Hall Committee, who plan and organize these kinds of events. And I'd like to thank them. Kathy Feek, Amy Mutal, Ann Hess, Debbie Leviton, Scott Becker, Troy and Karen Thiel, Samantha St. John, and Beth Gale. And thank you to Alice Yao, Allstate Insurance, who provided those blue disaster kits, which I hope you guys all had a chance to grab. Finally, thank you to Kirkland Performance Center for giving us this space tonight. So with that, I'd like to introduce Kirkland's Mayor, Penny Sweet.
Thank you, Kevin. Good evening, everybody. Little disappointed that we don't have more businesses represented tonight, but maybe we'll do a good job. We can get the word out. This is something that I believe is really, really important for the business community of Kirkland. We're here to talk about emergency management and the risks and the rules for our business community. About 10 years ago, when I went through, actually it was more like 14, when I went through Citizens Emergency Response Training, I asked the question, what happens when the big one comes and I'm in my store? Well, in 2001, we had a little one, and we lost over $5,000 worth of product off the shelves of the Grape Choice and almost lost my dog in the Nisqually earthquake. It was scary, but we didn't have a plan. And part of why we didn't have a plan was because we're concentrating as a city and as a community on training our neighbors to take care of themselves. Because when an earthquake happens, the fire department, the first responders are going to be going to the hospitals. They're going to be going to business centers where buildings are collapsing. And we in the neighborhoods are expected to take care of each other and ourselves. So that's why we've been concentrating so heavily over the course of many years on training CERTs in our community. How many CERTs do we have now? Heather, can you guess? 28 classes of about 30 people. So we have a lot of people out there. As a matter of fact, my own neighborhood, 5 of us organized and mapped the neighborhood for 42 homes. So 42 homes in my neighborhood, all connected, are prepared. We know where all of our emergency supplies are. We know how to turn off the gas and where the gas connections are in our homes. And each other's. We know where dogs and cats live. We've got a map of the whole thing. We mapped our neighborhood. So it's something worth thinking about, and it's also something worth thinking about in terms of our business community. So I'm really glad we're having these conversations. It's past time. Up until January, for the 6 years previous, I sat on the King County Emergency Management Advisory Council. Toby Nixon, council member in the right there, is serving us in that capacity right now. But as a member, I had an upfront and personal exposure to disaster response across the county and the state. I know firsthand what a huge role preparedness plays in recovery. The mission of the City of Kirkland Office of Emergency Management is to work in partnership with the community to provide useful information for readiness, response, and recovery for all hazards. Kirkland is at risk of a variety of hazards, ranging from power outages to building fires, severe wind, and we now know snow, events to even earthquakes and volcanoes. The City Council is committed to investing resources to make sure that our community is prepared for any type of hazard that we might encounter. And in recent years, the City Council has committed financial resources to ensure that we have experienced emergency preparedness professionals on our staff. These investments recently included hiring an emergency preparedness coordinator, who I hope you met, Carissa. Is Carissa down here? Okay, well, Chris is up top, but we hired her to support the incredible work of our emergency manager, Heather Kelly, who I'm going to turn this over to in just a second. City staff from across the organization are receiving training and participating in exercises to make sure that we're prepared at all levels to respond when disaster strikes. We've also invested in resources and technology to modernize our emergency operations center. We will even practice some of those exercises at this year's 4th of July celebration when we have some 30,000 extra bodies in the middle of downtown. And just like we're practicing and preparing, we need you to plan, practice, and prepare. We can't predict when a disaster will occur, but we can say with utmost certainty that one will occur at some time in the future. At home, please make sure that you're prepared to survive on your own for 2 weeks. As a business owner, we need you to be informed and prepared so that your business operations can be sustained and so that you can be a part of recovery efforts. So joining us this evening is a wonderful first step, and I hope sincerely that we as a business community can come together and assure that we are as prepared as any metropolitan city for what could happen to us in the future. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to our amazing emergency management professional, Heather Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor Sweet. We appreciate that introduction and kind of setting the table. And that's what we want to do here is being prepared, talking about disasters can be somewhat uncomfortable. Are you ready? Do you have enough? Do you know what you need to know? So we decided we're going to do more of an informal group discussion tonight. We're going to share with you a case study. We're fortunate to have representatives from the city of Bothell here to talk about their 2016 Main Street fire that was both unexpected and with silver linings, I think the words were. We're going to talk to you about what the risks are and what you can do as a business in Kirkland. We're going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity and technology and what you might need to know there. And then the real meat of it, what's the insurance? What's the side of it that's going to help carry you through? You hopefully, when you came in, you got small cards to be able to put your questions. We encourage you to write those down. We'll get you to pass those in, and we'll do a question and answer session at the end. I want to let you know up front that we will follow up. If we have questions or if there's something you want to know about that maybe this panel doesn't represent, we will follow up with you in a follow-on email after this event to give you the direction, give you some information about where you can find answers to those questions that perhaps we can't address. So again, we want to have a discussion, a dialogue. We want to make sure that you're getting your needs met and we're able to get the message out there to help the community and the businesses of Kirkland be more prepared for the disaster that, as Mayor Sweet said, will come. It's just a matter of when. With that, I want to start the night off, though, with our guests from Bothell Kenmore Chamber. Starting it off is Brittany Caldwell. She is the executive director, and I will hand it over and let you ladies share your story.
Hello, thank you so much. So again, Brittany Caldwell, the Executive Director of the Bothell Kenmore Chamber, and I first want to thank the City of Kirkland and the Kirkland Chamber for having us here today. It's truly an honor to be here to share a little bit about our story and participate in the discussion. So obviously, emergency preparedness is incredibly important for everyone, and as business owners and representatives, we have the unique challenge of not only having our home safe and our family and supplies in our cars, but also taking care of our business as well. So as many of you know, many of our businesses were impacted by the fire that occurred on Main Street almost 3 years ago today. So I personally will never forget the day that my phone rang about 4 o'clock in the morning. It was the City of Bothell asking for help from the Chamber, communicating with businesses. The fire was still going, the streets were closed, businesses could not access their building, and everyone was scared and worried and not sure what to do. So the fire on Main Street originated in the Mercantile apartment building. It was in a building that was under construction. Of course, unexpected. To this day, they don't know how the fire started. It actually jumped the street and then burnt down what was called the Bothell Mall, which housed lots of our small businesses. And then, of course, the damage didn't stop there. It also, many of the other businesses experienced severe smoke damage and water damage from the fire. So although we're here to talk about emergency preparedness, I also want to take a moment to thank all the people that helped during that day. If you weren't watching it on the news, it was not a minor incident. It took 12 fire departments, 46 emergency vehicles, 126 personnel, and Jennifer Warmke, our City of Bothell Emergency Preparedness Manager, couldn't be with us today, but we are just so grateful for the service that they provided to contain the fire, and most importantly, not to have any injuries of people in the fire was huge. So the chamber was just inundated with phone calls. People wanted to know, not those needing help, but those wanting to offer help. So we just thought, what can we do? We know people wanted to donate money, and so the owner of Alexa's Cafe and Catering, Lee Henderson, and I met, and we came up with a plan. Fortunately enough, we were given a toolkit by the Finney Ridge Neighborhood Association. It's for small businesses or businesses of any size. It's not just a fire, it's any kind of emergency. And Finney Ridge had just experienced the gas explosion that just really impacted many, many small businesses in their community. So they gave us the toolkit to be able to assist our local business community. So people wanted to give, and so we created an application process where the businesses applied for funds and people in the community donated to us. So through our application process, we learned that 9 of the businesses had losses under $10,000. 3 businesses had losses estimated in the beginning from $10,000 to $20,000, 9 businesses $20,000 to $100,000, and 4 businesses over $100,000. So this was their livelihood. This is what they were living on. Some people were near retirement. Some people were just new businesses who had just started out, ranging from Cozy Corner Cafe to Bothell Acupuncture to even the artist who had art displaying in Leela Yoga Studio. And what we learned through the process is that many of the small business owners had very little and even no insurance, so it was quite challenging. And then those that had insurance, it was a long road to figure out what to do next. So as I mentioned, we formed the Bothell Fire Fund. The community stepped up huge and donated tons and tons. We threw a block party to try to get the community together and support these businesses that needed help. That day alone, the community raised $60,000. Ultimately, over $100,000 was raised. And so it was an incredible outpour of support. And of course, that money just was distributed directly right back to the businesses. Not nearly enough for the loss that they endured, but at least a little something to get them back on their feet. So the community support was tremendous, but of course the hole in the ground on Main Street and 102nd is just a reminder of what could happen at any moment. And here with us today is one of the business owners who lost everything in the fire. Level 7 Salon owner, Andrya Rytter, has been truly an inspiration to me, a small business owner who endured the devastation. She became a spokesperson for the small businesses that were impacted by the fire and has come back stronger than ever. So it is my pleasure to introduce Andrya Rytter.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. As a small business owner, kind of taking care of yourself, you think you've kind of got it all put together and you followed all your friends' advice and your parents' backing and you think you've got it going on until you get a phone call at 4 a.m. from your neighbor telling you that your whole town is on fire, because that's what it looked like and that's what it felt like. So I can share with you my story and some of the things that I learned after the fire. Sorry, I'm a little nervous talking to a group this size. I'm a hairdresser. I talk to one person at a time, usually. So I have the 4 top things that I wish I had known the day before the fire, or 2 days before the fire. And sadly, I learned after. But number 1 is meet with your insurance broker on a regular basis. As Brittany said, many of us were very underinsured. And when I started my business, I started very small. I worked by myself. I had enough equipment for 3 hairstylists and enough supplies to get by for a week. And within 2.5 years, I doubled my square footage, I quadrupled my manpower, and I can't even begin to tell you how much supplies I had on hand. Each tube of hair color is about $10, and I had hundreds of them. And some of them are still in what we refer to as the pit on Main Street. I called my insurance broker, let him know that we had expanded, and he said, "Great, you're covered." He never once asked me what was in that space or how I was using it or how many people were working with me. And it turns out that my insurance coverage stopped at $15,000 for the contents of my building, which would have been plenty to cover my supplies when I was working by myself. But with 5 of us and all of our supplies and all of the equipment I had purchased, it wasn't nearly enough. So that's the advice that I heard over and over that I never took. Since the fire, we've met with our homeowner's insurance and our car insurance, and we're probably way overinsured now, but it's better to be safe than sorry. You know, a little out of your pocket for premiums right now is nothing compared to trying to rebuild after a massive loss. So number 2, your safe isn't that safe. It was 8 weeks in between the fire and demolition. The roof had collapsed, so the building was far too damaged for anyone to go into. At some parts of the building, you couldn't even tell there had been a fire at all. So it was kind of heartbreaking to walk by, look in your window, and see all of your things. The fire department, the morning of the demolition, very quickly walked through and they looked for money and safes, and there was none left. Looters came in, took every bit of money out of our building, pried open a safe, and one safe was completely gone. They just picked it up and walked off. So please bolt those things down, fasten them down, make them hard to carry off. We were supposed to have had 24-hour security watching our building. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. The first week or so, the Bothell Police Department did a fantastic job. And then after that, it went to a private company. My mom likes to keep the key to her safe on top of it. Don't do that, please. And think about what you're keeping in there. You know, make regular deposits. If you keep cash on hand, take pictures or scan documents so you have copies of them in the cloud. Something else. We used to keep all of our hair color formulas on paper, on filing, little recipe cards. Those are all gone. So now we keep them in the cloud. We write down everything under a client file. So number 3, back up your files. That kind of goes in hand with documenting or scanning documents that you would keep in your safe. I used to balance my books once a week. I would sit down, do my QuickBooks, try and remember each transaction, hope that I got within $50 of balancing my account. I had just purchased a new QuickBooks software program on Wednesday. On Thursday, I bought a new laptop, got everything synced up. I did a backup on a USB, and I put that in my purse. And by 2 a.m., my business was burning. So those of you with businesses and business insurance, your loss of income is insured, and forensic accountants will take a look at your books and make sure that you're reimbursed for what your loss of income is. And if you can't accurately reproduce those, if they're lost, then you're really missing out. And that was, not only was it necessary to keep my family going, but it was necessary to make up the difference in my actual loss and what my insurance company reimbursed me for all my supplies and my equipment. And number 4, last but not least, make friends with your neighbors. As Brittany said, she got a phone call at 4 a.m. from this assistant city manager asking for help in contacting businesses. They're busy. In a massive emergency, they will not have time to contact you. Our landlord never contacted me. He sent me my damage deposit several weeks later, but we never did hear from him on the day of the fire or since. So a neighbor on Main Street is the one that called me after a client of his called him. It's going to be your friends and neighbors that help you out. All of this is true, whether it's a burst pipe that floods your basement or if there's a massive earthquake in the region. We all need to help each other, like the mayor said, and just, exchange contact information. Just pass your business card around, and it will save a lot of time and heartache in the end. So hopefully that's the end of my story, and hopefully you can take some tidbits of information from that. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you both for coming and sharing that story. The point of this is to give it that real touch, that real feel. Because whether you're a retail business, you're an at-home business, you're a virtual business, whether you have customers or clients, whether you're large or small, this is what can happen. It can be a split moment, a call in the middle of the night that changes who you are and what you do and how you survive. So my name is Heather Kelly. I'm the emergency manager for the city of Kirkland, and I get to talk to you about all the bad things that can happen in Kirkland, because that's what you have to start with. You have to start with understanding what the risk is to know what you need to plan for, prepare for, be ready for, and learn those 4 points in advance. So starting with that is the risks in Kirkland. I like to divide risk into 3 different categories. We have disruptions, which are things like snow, ice, power outages. It's annoying. It's a disruption to life and to our normal routine, but it's not going to come to the end of all end. It will go away and get better. The next one we have is what we call emergencies. And this is an example of the Main Street fire, where it's either area or building specific. It happens to you. It happens to your business. The gas explosion was another example in Seattle. It's something occurring that impacts you. And the last category we talk about is disasters. This is where we have the widespread. We overwhelm the resources. And more often than not, in the last 2, the emergencies and disasters, we see injury or loss of life. It's a great story when we can walk away without that being part of it. But I tell people, true disasters, we lose more than just things. And that's part of that. So when we talk about those here in the city, looking at the primary impacts of those emergencies and disasters, we talk about fire, that's a potential. Weather, whether it's wind, whether it's ice, snow, those are pieces. A network outage or a piece of your network or system going down can create those disruptions and emergencies. Utility failures, pandemics, and obviously the big one that we all worry about is the catastrophic earthquake. And one of the reasons that the earthquake, I think, rises to everybody's attention so much is because when we have a fire, when we have a network outage, we have others we can call in. We can go to our backups and we can get help. But when we have the catastrophic earthquake, the wide area has no help. And I think that's one of the things that we fear the most is that's when we look at the 14 days and the 3 to 4 months just to figure out what's going on, let alone the years to recovery that it may take. We also have business-specific situations. So again, depending on your business, I encourage you to stop and think about, am I a terror target? Does somebody not like me? Am I in government or am I in some other environment? Could I be at risk for cyber attack? One business over another may be another thing. Am I in a business that puts me at risk for what we call acts of violence? This can either be active shooters, this can be domestic violence, people that are disgruntled. Do I have a business that's right next to a stream or near a flood risk? So looking at your business dictates sometimes what the risk is that you need to look at. Now in this area we have a few secondary hazards that we talk about. Those are things like volcanoes. We don't have a volcano in Kirkland. But if the wind's blowing the wrong direction and Mount Baker blows, we will have ashfall, and that will be an issue and a problem for us in Kirkland. So sometimes we have to think a little out of the box, which is the best part of my job because I get to be really creative. If we have a mass evacuation need, That can be because of a hazardous material spill. It can be because of, something occurring in the environment, a large landslide. If there's a need to relocate a large percentage of the population, that again is going to be one of those secondary impacts to all the businesses because your community may not be there to support you as it has in the past. So the first catch is to understand the risk, and looking into that risk, the details do matter. What does that hazard mean to you is the first question you should be looking at. The second one, though, is about taking action. So great, I'm at risk for earthquake. Now what do I do? So we have a couple of different components when we talk about taking action. And I think you've heard it already, and I think you're going to continue to hear it. Communication is key. Knowing the phone number, knowing how to reach your neighbors, your employees, your partners, your insurance agent, all of those key factors is critical, because when you get that phone call in the middle of the night, or you run out of your business because the walls are shaking or the fire is happening in the kitchen, do you have that information readily available and with you? That's one of the first keys. When we talk about taking action, we talk about planning, in general and specific. So you have to think of all these different scenarios we talked about and look at what does it take for me to prepare for this, to get through this, and for many of our businesses, the important piece is to recover from it, to maintain continuity, to maintain keeping operations of your business, because for many of you, the business is not just a job. It's your passion, it's your pride, it's your livelihood, and being able to sustain that is one of the keys when we talk about disaster preparedness. How do we prepare for these different hazards? Sometimes it's getting things. It's buying first aid kits. It's having food and water available. It's getting the extra locks and nuts to hold heavy objects to the wall so they don't fall down. Sometimes it's educating our employees. How many of you offer first aid classes to your employees? Just as a bonus and a courtesy. That can make a huge difference in an emergency and a disaster. And the big question, you don't have to raise your hand on this, how many of you actually practice your emergency plans and drills and evacuate and go outside and stand on the street corner and get under the desk on shakeout and drop cover and hold and do those things? Because practice is what really makes the difference in the long run. When we talk about responding, we take all those preparedness and practice components and we put them into action. But you have to make decisions during that emergency about what that action is going to be. How are you going to protect life and property and the environment? Are you going to drop cover and hold because the ground is shaking? Or are you going to run, hide, and fight because someone has just walked in the door with a gun firing? Those are the actions that you have to take during response to be able to survive the situation. And as I mentioned, the big key is resume or recover your business. It's what in emergency management we call accept the new reality, because no matter how well you fare, no matter how much you build back and how great it is, your world will be changed because of the experience you went through. The new reality may be great or it may be very challenging, and the goal is to figure out how do we move forward with that. So I'm kind of an example person, so I thought I'd just take one of those hazards and quickly walk you through what it would look like for business preparedness. Earthquake's the big one. It's what we're all afraid of. I always say if we plan for the worst, everything else is doable. So when we're planning for an earthquake, think of your business, whether it's in your home, whether it's retail, whether it's a big building. Where are the safe locations? When the ground starts shaking and the glass starts breaking, where should you be? Do you know? Do you have those identified? Have you practiced your evacuation routes? And not just the one you take every day at 5 o'clock. Okay, pretend that one is blocked. Try a different route and see if you can figure your way out. Do you have the supplies on hand? When was the last time you looked at the first aid kit? How old are the Band-Aids? Is the tape brittle and falling apart? Those are all important things. And do you know how to communicate? Do you have the information and the tools to make that happen? When we look at preparing for an earthquake, it's things like having earthquake kits. It's things like helping your community and your employees be prepared at home, because it may not happen when they're at work, but if they survive at home, they're going to come back to work because they need a paycheck to keep surviving day to day. Do they have a plan at home, especially for those like us in first response, that if I can't get home for a few days, is my family okay? And for some of you in hospitality or service industry, that may be a piece of it, is you may be doing your job and you need to know your family's doing okay back there. It's taking things like, the mayor mentioned the community emergency response team training. It's having those drills. It's doing the things you can do now to make it less of an impact to you at the time of. When the earthquake happens, I've said it 3 times now. They say if you say it 3 times, you'll get it. What do? Drop, cover, and hold. Protect yourself. Get underneath something so that the shaking and the things that fall off the shelf because we didn't secure them don't hit you in the head and cause a worse situation. Assess what's going on. Check on your staff, your customers, your clients. Take action. And this is where the decision making comes in. Do you leave or do you stay? Do you do first aid or do you transport? Do you need to shut off utilities because water's flowing or electricity is having issues or not? These are all issues that you're going to have to manage during response, but your preparedness and planning will put you in a position to be successful in that. And the last piece for an earthquake is, how do we recover? I'll tell you first and foremost, in the recovery situations I've been in, and I think you'll back me up on this, it's taking care of your staff, supporting them, making sure their needs are met so that they can continue to meet the needs of your business. Yes, you'll rebuild and you'll repair, and if you've done a good job, you'll have the insurance and all that you need to do that. But it's also looking at that greater community. How can you reach to the block parties and to the partners that are there to work together to sustain and survive? The key points that I'll share, and then I'm going to pass this off to more interesting stuff than me, is to have a plan and a concept of how you're going to meet the needs of your business, of your clients, and of your staff. Because your staff is your greatest asset. And if they are not okay and they are not in a position to be successful, your business will not be successful. I've heard the term many times, employees are a dime a dozen, I'll just replace them. Not a lot of businesses anymore can really buy by that. We have specialties. We have time commitment built into that staff, and having them be able to support you through this emergency and disaster will be the biggest outcome that you can have on that. One of the things we've been noticing in the city, as the mayor said, we've been doing exercises, we've been practicing, we've been preparing so that the city staff is there and ready to support all of you when the bad situation happens. We've been doing these drills, and one of the things we're learning on drills is how dependent we are on technology, on systems, on networks, on tools and toys and devices. So I'm thrilled to have with us Brenda Cooper, our Director of IT Services for the City of Kirkland, and very well versed and experienced in disaster resiliency, that's going to share with us some of the ideas and lessons about cyber aspects of disasters.
Thank you. First, it was great that one of your points that you made was how important it was that you had access to your data, because that's one of the important things that can really, really save you quite a bit. So cybersecurity and worrying about security is one of the things that keeps me up at night in my day job, trying to take care of the city's cyber technology. And cybersecurity breaches are really one of the greater hazards that can happen to any of you as small businesses, and they can happen when you don't expect it. They can be at 4 o'clock in the morning, they can be at 2 in the afternoon, they can happen to just one of you and not anyone else, but they can be very serious. So I want to share a few statistics with you. 58% of cyber attacks target small businesses. And the reason for that is actually because in many cases, small businesses are less prepared. Larger businesses often have people who do nothing but spend their time on cybersecurity, or even many people who do that. Most small businesses do not, and in fact, very seldom have much time to worry about cybersecurity, even though I'd like to hope that you all do worry about it a little bit. 60% of small businesses are not able to stay in business after a serious cyber attack. So that's how much damage it can do to businesses if you are seriously compromised. The average cost of a ransomware attack for a small to medium business, so including some that maybe are a little bigger than in this room, but nonetheless is $5 million. So that's a lot of money that it can cost, because if you think about it, you lose your data, which can be a lot of your history, a lot of your information, can be very difficult to rebuild. You lose access to your systems, and in many cases you have to close your business for some period of time until you can get the systems up that you need for your day-to-day work. So I put up at the top, and if you didn't get it, grab one on your way out. There's a flyer on cybersecurity basics, and I want to go over a few of those things. And a lot of them are very, very simple. So one of them is, you know how when you're working away on your computer and you're typing a memo or you're working on your QuickBooks and you get this note, hey, you need to update your computer. I'm going to interrupt you right now and update your computer. And you go, no, I don't want to be interrupted right now. Well, you really do. You either want to be interrupted at that moment or you want to be sure that you've set your computer to do its updates on a regular basis, because companies like Microsoft and Google, they keep their software up to date, and they're constantly responding to the threat that's out there in the cyber landscape. So they're responding to criminals, they're responding to governments, they're responding to just any backdoor that people find that is out there. So it's really important to update your software. It's important to require passwords and to change your passwords. Most people nowadays at least require them, but many people I talk to don't change them or make their staff change them on a regular basis. And I'm not covering every piece of this because some of them are I think, the most important. Require strong passwords and train your staff. Heather mentioned that it's important to drill. It's also important to train in cybersecurity, and it's particularly important to train on email. Most malicious activity that happens to businesses, most cyber attacks and most ransomware, and ransomware, if you don't know it, is where someone will take over your computer and then they want you to give them Bitcoin or perhaps some other form of money, but usually it's Bitcoin these days in order to recover your data. Most of those come in, 92% of those come in through email. So training and training and training on email and on phishing can be really, really important. The emails that come in that carry these attack vectors really look like they're coming from your bank these days, or from a business down the road, or from someone in your business, which wasn't really true 5 to 10 years ago, but now they look very, very authentic. And there are YouTube videos on how to train. There are a number of training resources on government websites that you can find in order to learn more about that. And then the most important, and as you found, is back up your data. It's really, really important to back up your data and to have your backup in a separate location. Had her backup been in her business at the time of her fire, then she would not have had access to that information. And so it's really important that you back up your data and you put it elsewhere. And these days, I highly recommend that you put your data in the cloud, or at least put your backup in the cloud. Now, that's a little bit situational, so it may depend some on the actual business that you're running and the systems that you're running. But having data in the cloud is a great way to make sure that even if we have a regional disaster, you're able to recover and find your business information. So I'm going to stop there so people can ask questions, or we'll have some time for questions afterwards. And I want to introduce Kenton Brine from the Northwest Insurance Council, who's going to talk about the importance of insurance.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the City of Kirkland and the Kirkland Chamber for having this panel discussion. My name is Kenton Brine, I'm president of the Northwest Insurance Council. We are a nonprofit insurer-supported organization that provides information about home, business, auto insurance to the media and consumers and policymakers in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. One of the lessons I've learned about the kind of work I do is that every now and then I might appear on a TV news report about some insurance-related disaster or another, and my kids will say, "Oh, look, there's Dad on TV telling us something else they don't cover." And I think there is an important lesson in there, though, because the one policy that is least valuable to you is the one you don't have, or the one you don't have enough of when that disaster comes. And of course, none of us know when that time is going to come, especially when we talk about something like earthquakes, as has been discussed here. Fortunately, I read the New Yorker article, and I know that everything west of I-5 is going to be liquefied by the big one. But we're all east, so I think it's going to be fine here. I don't think anything to worry about. So, according to the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, which is another insurance industry-supported organization that does tremendous research in building and home safety, 1 in 4 businesses that are forced to close because of a disaster, like a fire or a storm or an earthquake, never reopen. And I think that the lesson that we're hearing here today reinforces that concept that your recovery, your ability to recover as a business is directly proportional to your preparation before that disaster comes. From the insurance perspective, that means, as we've also heard really directly today, it's important to have knowledge of what's in your insurance policy, have a trusted person that you work with at your company or in an agency or brokerage that you can ask questions of, and ask all the questions. If you're not sure what questions to ask, we're a resource. There are other resources out there about what questions to ask about the kind of coverage you have versus the kind that you need. There's a statistical organization that's the name of which is escaping me right at the moment, but it did a survey recently that showed that on the homeowner side, 3 out of 5 homes in the United States today are underinsured by at least 20%. So when you talk about something like a business inventory where your business has grown and you've got more space, you've added more space, you have more employees, you have more inventory in stock, you've got more to lose. If your insurance agent isn't asking you when you're having a review how your business has changed and what things you've added and what the value of those things are, and aren't coming out to visit your business and know more about it, you might want to shop around for another agent or another company that's paying more closely attention to how your business is changing and growing over time. The worst thing, one of the worst things that can happen to you is that you think you have coverage and then you find out you don't. So generally speaking, what's in a business insurance policy? The things that are covered in a business policy are not entirely different from the things that are covered in a homeowner's policy. Things like wind from a tornado or a windstorm are going to be covered. Fire, obviously, is going to be covered. Gas explosions, lightning, water damage from inside the building. If something inside the building causes a water leak, that is often covered. And then there are things that are standard business policies do not automatically cover, like flooding that comes in from outside, from rainstorm or backed up sewers or city water lines that break. Obviously, earthquake is not a standard business coverage. You have to buy that extra. That is also true of, I mentioned flood, volcano, earth movement. When you think about earth movement, most people consider that to just be earthquake, but we get a lot of mudslides around here. I don't know if you've noticed, it rains sometimes and it causes the earth to move. There have been sinkholes outside of businesses and parking lots and so forth. They're not just limited to city streets. And that is not part of your standard business policy. So asking questions of your agent and or company to make sure you have the coverage you need in those just-in-case moments is a highly critical thing to do. You know, we do have not only sort of the unknown threats, but there are the known threats. We do have sort of annually, particularly in parts of King County and Snohomish County, almost annually we have flooding. And that is insurance that tends to come from the National Flood Insurance Program for homeowners, but there are specialty lines insurers that write coverage for business flooding, and those limits can be higher than what's offered through the National Flood Insurance Program. So if you haven't looked into it, it's a good thing to take a look at and find out if it's a cost-effective coverage for you to have. So those are the basics about insurance. The 3 Ps that I've heard mentioned here a couple of times today are, you know, planning, knowing your policies, and then having some practices around your business. And one of the advantages to investigating and working with a really good insurer and or agency is that you'll have the opportunity to have some risk management done. So someone can come and help you assess the risks that you have that you might not have thought about. And they can also do some risk management techniques to help you minimize and mitigate the risks that your business might face in the event of a disaster. We all see the aftermath of disasters on TV and see how horrible it is, but it's kind of hard to visualize how that might affect you in a moment of crisis in particular. So planning before the disaster, planning for what happens during the disaster, like evacuation plans and escape routes and the kinds of things that have been mentioned, and then afterwards. And I'm going to mention a couple things that I think are really critically important that have come up before. One is, of course, record keeping. having your business records and data securely stored, particularly in the cloud, somewhere not in the business. But along with that is keeping record of what you own, what you actually own. You can't go through a destroyed building and add up the things that you lost. It's a pile of rubble, and it's going to be cleared away by a bulldozer. So you want to have, even if it's as simple as walking through with your smartphone and shooting video and commenting on what these things are and what they cost, the more record you have of what you've lost after disaster, the easier your insurance claim becomes. And having the right coverage is critical, but you also don't want to be haggling with your insurance company for months after disaster. That's another thing that keeps you from reopening your business and getting back in touch with your customers before they found another place to get what they were getting from you. So the more records you have on hand, the more things you can just hand to your insurance agent or claims person after the disaster occurs, the faster your claim is going to be handled satisfactorily and settled. The insurance companies that I work with, and we have, I think, 15 member companies. Some of them are large national writers like State Farm and Farmers. Some of them are smaller regional writers like Grange Insurance and Mutual of Enumclaw. And they all, they have teams of people ready to go to the disaster sites and settle claims and write checks. And if for everything from, the business interruption coverage to liability coverage if someone is injured on your property during the disaster, to, the loss of inventory, to paying yourself and your employees, get that money flowing is the key to getting back on your feet. And the more of this information that you have, the more information you can provide to them, the swifter that money is going to start to flow to you. And that's going to mean the difference between surviving that disaster, recovering from it, or just giving up. And getting your claims settled over a really long period of time, sort of almost after it's, about beyond saving the business, and that's what you don't want. So again, my three main points I would say in terms of insurance are make sure your insurance is keeping up with your business growth. Make sure your agent or a broker or company know about what's going on in your business so you have the coverage that you need. Ask specifically about, replacement cost coverage or what the business equivalent of that is to make sure that as the cost of rebuilding something that's destroyed escalates, your insurance policy automatically keeps up with that cost. Secondly, make sure you keep good inventory as up to date as possible, and again, off-site if possible. And three, make sure you know your agent or company well and have frequent communications with them. And if you're not satisfied, there are a lot of companies right here in Kirkland. There are a lot of agencies. There are a lot of companies that want your business. So they're eager to outdo the other guy. They're out there beating each other with sticks on TV to get your business. So, and then on the planning side, I'm less of an expert about planning, but I do want to point you to a couple of resources in addition to what local, regional, and state agencies already provide in terms of disaster planning and preparation. And one of those is I mentioned earlier, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. It's ibhs.org, or I believe it's .org. Yeah. You can also link to our page at NW, like Northwest, nwinsurance.org. We can steer you to these resources. The IBHS in particular has a small business toolkit, which will guide you through a complete process of planning, asking you all the preliminary questions about your business and sort of what stage your business is in terms of preparing for a disaster, and then helping guide you through the process of setting up those plans. Everything from what to do before, through what to do during, how to protect your employees, how to create evacuation plans, how to practice these things, and then what kind of coverage you should be looking at for your business and so forth. I didn't bring it with me because it's like 45 pages long, but it's available online. You can download it on PDF and print it out at your workspace and begin implementing it tomorrow. And it will go hand in hand and help you have an educated, informed conversation with your own insurer about the coverage that you have and what you might need. So that's all I have. And thank you again for the invitation to be with you.
Thank you. So we're going to be collecting those questions that you might have, and Troy is going to be our MC and read those for us. We are videoing this presentation, and the intent of that is not all of the thousands of businesses were able to be here tonight. We will put the link up on the city's website as well as the chamber's website. So that's why Troy's going to come up here and do the questions this way so we can make sure and capture those. If there's any questions you have, as I mentioned, that we aren't the experts to answer, we're going to do a follow-up on that. And also the links and the good information and the handouts and all of that, we will follow up this session with an email back to you with that information. We know it's been a lot to take in, but we want to make sure that we get that to you so you can continue the effort beyond tonight. So I think if we have any questions, I think actually Brenda has the first one.
I do. I have a question for you. You didn't mention cybersecurity insurance, and I think that's one of the ones that you need to get as an extra piece.
Yes, I believe that some business policies include some limited coverage for cyber-related issues, but it's probably more aimed at liability if you have a cybersecurity leak, as opposed to what happens to your data and how do you rebuild your own IT infrastructure. And those coverages are available, but they are additional, and you need to inquire about them with your company or agent.
Yeah, and those can be super important, particularly the ones for liability that you mentioned. If your business saves any personal information, what we call PII, personally identifiable information, you save any social security information or any health information. So it's really dependent on your type of business, whether or not that's the most critical kind for you. But if you have other people's private data, you probably do want to look into cybersecurity insurance.
Troy.
There are some questions being written up, and I've got the first two. So here goes the first one. If there's a catastrophic event, we lose electricity, and all cell towers are down, how do we get information about the status of the emergency?
I'll take that one for you. So, yeah, we have backup redundancy systems beyond just the cellular services at the city level and out in the community level. So, first thing is having that AM/FM battery operated radio, because our information will be going through the media outlets through several different channels to get those updates. The other thing in Kirkland, we are fortunate to have a program called the Kirkland Emergency Communication Team. They are ham radio operators that work directly with the city, and we're working on a process to have posting stations throughout the city where you could go almost to a message board, see a posting of what's going on. We'll be relaying that information through those radio operators from the city emergency operations center out into the community and back and forth. The other method that we use is something that we use in wildland fires called a trap line. We're going to go where people congregate, coffee house probably around here, but and we put up big, pieces of plywood, and we post the messages on the plywood board so that you can get there and you can get information. So those are some of the methods we'll use.
Anyone else have a pipe in?
I just want to add that the city's website is in the cloud, so if you can get to some form of connectivity, which depends, but if you can get information that way, and even if you can just, by some miracle, get a call out to someone, they might be able to get you information.
Great, thanks. Here's the next one. If phones were down, how could someone reach family members? And secondary question here, how do we access the ham radio network?
So if phones are down, what things that we do know, and this has been seen in a couple different disasters in the nation now, is texting actually works when phone calls don't, takes up less bandwidth. The most common text in Superstorm Sandy was I am okay. So we encourage you to try texting over phone calls. That actually is becoming more hardened and is going through just fine. If you have questions about the ham radio team, you can let us know, Carissa or I, and we'll get you in contact with the team leaders for that.
I'm just going to add that this is one of those, it's a great question, and it's a good thing for all of those of us who are doing planning to discuss with our own families and within our own businesses before the disaster happens. If something happens and we're not able to get in touch with each other by the means that we're all used to, what's our backup plan? That's up to each of us to decide on our own. It's sort of part of the whole, being 2 weeks ready concept. you know, I don't know what it would be for my family off the top of my head, but we're going to talk about it when I get home.
Heather, do we still advise people to have an out-of-state contact?
We do. We advise an out-of-state contact. What we're finding, though, is upgrades to the telecommunication systems and through the cloud and having the VoIP over IP approach, that's becoming less of a need and an issue. Okay. I think to Kenton's point is having your plan. If we can't call, text, or reach, what do we do? Where do we go is kind of a third backup.
Okay, technical question here. Ransomware, can you be infected by just opening an email or only from attachments?
Excellent question. Generally, ransomware comes from either an attachment or, these days more commonly, if you just click on a link. So the most common thing is actually because someone is going to click on a link. You open an email, it looks like it's from your bank, it looks like it's from someone else, or someone is sending a file is another way it comes. It often will look like a harmless file, like a PDF, and it'll even be named as if it were a harmless file, but then when you click on it, it will not be harmless. There are more instances of what they call fileless malware, and in that case, I believe it's still not generally that just opening the email will do it. I think you usually have to do something. But my advice is if you're not expecting the email, you don't need the email. So if you're not expecting the email, and it's not from a verifiable source, and a likely email that makes a lot of sense inside your world, if there's any reason that you have red flags going off in the back of your head, don't click on it. I mean, you don't even need to open it. There's a lot of things that I just send right to the trash.
And again, I'm no expert in this area, but I do know that if you, there are some telltale signs oftentimes with these. They look harmless. If you look at the URL, the address where it came from, it's quite often just a little off. I get one regularly from Apple, and it looks kind of like an apple, but the address doesn't end the right way. So you just have to, you know, I think some of it's trying to be smarter than the people who are trying to outsmart you, but I think your rule is the safer one. If it doesn't look like something you were expecting, it's probably not something you need to open.
They're just getting so much better that a lot of the rules, like the one you were talking about, it's still good to look because sometimes that will be a good clue. But really, many times, there's almost no easy visual clue at all anymore.
Next question. Is business inventory that is stored off-site covered under a business insurance policy, or are there restrictions?
Well, every insurance policy is different, and every company that offers these policies can be a little different, and that's why it's important to know what's in yours. But generally speaking, yes, if you have, and it's similar with your homeowner's policy, if you have, your stuff is insured wherever it is, so as long as it's part of your home inventory. So yes, your business inventory would be covered in most cases, under most policies, if it's stored offsite in another facility.
Okay, the last question I have so far, and let us know if you have one out there. What support is available to those businesses who aren't prepared? Are there relief funds available?
So I'll start and I'll let you finish. In certain circumstances, there may be federal support or funding through the Small Business Administration. I know with the Bothell Fire, that was one of the efforts I worked with the Emergency Management on to try to identify. It goes back to what Kenton said, though, about documentation and being able to prove assets and losses and components and uninsured losses. And so there may be, we tend to think of disasters as, oh, there's a presidential declaration, everybody's getting money. No, doesn't work that way, particularly with businesses. A lot of what the Small Business Administration does is loans, low interest, long-term loans to assist businesses. So there's very little handout of money. It's definitely much more of a process to get a little help to get you started. It will not make you whole in any way.
So the Small Business Administration declared our disaster an economic disaster zone, and only 2 of them have been declared in Washington State, our incident and the Finney Ridge gas explosion. So that did make our businesses eligible for certain types of loans and relief. And I honestly, it was almost 3 years ago. I don't remember if we were just insured enough or I got tired of the red tape. It's just a lot of paperwork. I know that there was, our city kind of formed together a team of experts from, you know, the federal government, the IRS. There were tax implications for some business owners and building owners. So I know that resource was available to me, but I must not have felt the need at the time. And to be honest, the first month I don't really remember much. I mean, we just got by. But we completely recovered, so that's a silver lining, yes. Right? We came out okay.
I think your comments covered it really well. If you are eligible for some relief, it's going to almost certainly come in the form of a low-interest loan. And so you still have whatever other business loans you had. You're still trying to rebuild your business, and those may well exceed what's available to you in terms of in terms of those loans as well. So for those businesses that are not insured or that are underinsured, it's just going to be a much steeper hill to climb and a much heavier rock to push than it is for those who have the appropriate coverage.
Yeah, my experience with recovery is that most financial institutions do not forgive loans simply because you had a disaster or an emergency. So they may add to your loan to offer something to help you get going, but very few do forgiveness. It's just not very common. So you may have no business now and you have a whole set of loans that you had from your business. So that's another insurance and financial aspect to look for. I'm curious from Bothell, because having worked a little bit with you guys at the beginning, I know for your situation, there was a lot of business-to-business support in that people were finding chairs in other locations and the businesses were coming together. Can you speak to a little bit about that and maybe empower Kirkland to kind of get that mindset?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, a lot of it was unfortunately not proactive, but it was reactive in the sense of people just telling everyone what they needed. There was a Facebook group that was created, and people were sharing, this is my need, and it was often being met. So not only with financial assistance and sharing, but even, for example, all the employees of the cafe were offered jobs at other cafes on the street because people were really... It was really quite incredible to see how much support was given. And so similarly, yes, with supplies. When people needed things, they would tell us about it, we would post it, and then it was often met by the community members. Anything?
Right. Yeah, so we were a staff of 5, and immediately I was getting direct messages on Facebook with offers of chairs and other salons in the area. 3 of the 5 of us were able to just move into a salon that had 3 chairs available 1 block away. Our local massage therapy clinic offered space for a skincare specialist. They use the same type of setting, same room, so she was able to put all of her items on a cart and just roll from empty room to empty room and keep her client base going. So with our community helping us out, most of us only missed 2 days of work. So the fire happened on a Friday. We clearly missed Friday and Saturday. We're typically closed Sunday, Monday, and on Tuesday we started new. Our appointment book is in the cloud, where we've captured most email addresses and phone numbers of clients. So we were able to do a mass mailing, and we just kept going. Never missed a beat.
We have one more question coming.
Okay.
Who won the Oscar? And the answer is... How do you get a group of businesses organized? Like a neighborhood? Oh, there's a backside. If a customer is hurt in your business in a disaster, are you liable?
Let that go to insurance.
Well, of course, it's going to depend on the circumstances. You can be a source of recovery for a person who is injured. Whether or not you're liable is probably going to be determined, in a legal setting. But that's why you have liability coverage. And what you don't want, and that's why it's important to have it too. It's just, that's standard as part of the policies that you buy, because you want your part of that to be dealt with by the insurer, and that insurer is there to defend and indemnify you in that circumstance. Because whether or not you are liable, you can be sued for anything, right? So you need someone who steps into your shoes and defends you in those circumstances. So whether or not you'll end up being held responsible is going to depend on a lot of factors, like did the disaster cause the injury, or did a known thing inside your or around your business that you didn't fix before the disaster cause the problem? That's, you know, and that's not going to be determined immediately. That's going to be determined over a period of time. But you don't want the hassle of having to work through that while you're also trying to, you know, rebuild your business. So, you know, liability insurance is part of your business standard policy or business owner's policy, and it provides limited coverage. There are limits to how much coverage it will provide. So make sure that when you talk to your insurance agent or company that you know what that limit is, and ask yourself, if my limit is $1 million and someone dies on my premises and I'm sued for it, is $1 million going to be enough? In the legislature this year, they changed our state's wrongful death law to allow more people to file lawsuits for wrongful death. And from the perspective of plaintiffs and the attorneys who represent them, that's a very good thing. But from the perspective of insurers and defendants, that's going to raise those costs significantly, because there will be more lawsuits filed and the amounts that they will adjudicate for will be higher. And so it's a good conversation to have with your insurer to make sure you have the adequate amount of coverage, whether you end up being liable or not. Because even if you're not held liable, someone has to pay an attorney to defend you, and that's part of the coverage.
So we conferred a little bit to make sure we're on. So as far as getting businesses together, is it the same as neighborhoods? Not exactly. We don't have a Map Your Neighborhood program, but you certainly could. Where's Carissa? Maybe we need to create that. But the first thing is join the chamber. This event is being hosted by the chamber to get businesses together. That's why we did the tables in the lobby to talk to each other. So become part of the chamber. The other thing we have is the Kirkland Downtown Association. You know, get involved with the associations. We have economic development through the city. We have several different methods and channels for you to get to know who's around. But the other side of it is go out of your door and go next door and say, hi, I own the store next door, or hi, I'm in the 3rd floor of this building. It's, you know, saying hi, get to know each other, and taking that initiative, because it will pay off in the end. That's it. Okay, so we're not going to hold you just to hold you. It's a gorgeous evening out there. We want you to go out and wander the streets of Kirkland and stop in for a beverage or a snack or something and enjoy the atmosphere. But we do want to thank you all for coming and spending some time with us, and for taking the importance of emergency preparedness out there. Again, we want to remind you, we'll do some follow-up. This video will be posted on the Chamber's website as well as the city's preparedness website. On behalf of the city, we'd just like to thank the Chamber for the opportunity to partner on this. On behalf of all of our sponsors, we thank you very much. And to all our business community, we look forward to working with you all, and ask you to share the word, share the message. Thank you all. Have a good night.